Good Erev Yom Tov, a good Hashanah Rabbah, a good Nfittel. A student brought home his report card one day and very proudly showed it to his father. His father's looking at it. And he's wiping off his glasses. He can't believe what he's looking at. He can't believe what he's seeing. Tanakh, 0. Mathematics, 5. English, could do better, needs improvement. Sports, he could put in more effort. The last line is singing in the school choir. And on singing in the school choir, he got the maximum possible, the highest possible score. He got a 10. His father becomes very upset. His father, he lays down the law. He says, "You're not ashamed? You're not embarrassed with these kinds of marks? How do you even have energy? How do you even have the chutzpah to sing?" We find ourselves in very strange times, a backwards time, a mixed up time. Apparently in Israel now, they shut down the shuls again. Can you imagine Simchas Torah when you can't go to shul? This is the kind of time that you couldn't imagine it in a dream. In a nightmare, you couldn't imagine it. And still, we have to celebrate Simchas Torah. What kind of Simchas Torah is it going to be? When the Sefer Torah that we're supposed to be dancing with and celebrating with and hugging and holding is going to be locked away in the Aron HaKodesh. How can we rejoice at a time like this? Baruch Hashem, in these United States and in other places, we're not so locked down like they are in the Holy Land. But we have a similar question. Yeah, we see the policies that shuls are making. We're going to put the Sefer Torah on the bima. We're not going to touch it. We're going to stand far away at the edge of the perimeter and dance in place or dance in a circle, making sure that everybody's 6 feet apart. Some shuls are putting together ropes with knots like in preschool. Every 8 feet is a knot, and you have to hold on to the rope and not let it become slack, because then you're going to be too close to the person in front of you. What kind of Simchas Torah is this? Let's leave the temporal question for a minute and go to a more eternal question. What are we going to read this Yom Tov? What are we going to read? Which parsha, which portion of the Torah we're going to read? We complete the entire Torah scroll on Simchas Torah. We're going to read the last paragraphs, the brachas, the blessings that Moshe Rabbeinu gives to the Jewish people. And what do we read in the last paragraph? We read about the passing of Moshe Rabbeinu. And the last 3 verses of the Torah are actually a eulogy, a huge compliment, a description of the value of this person. And the language is very generous. What does the Torah say there? It says, there never arose another prophet like Moshe Rabbeinu. There never rose another person who knew Hashem and spoke to him face to face. There never arose another person who performed such miracles like Moshe Rabbeinu did, where Hashem sent him to do all the miraculous and wondrous things that he did in the land of Egypt, and so on and so on and so on. And the great and awesome things, the closing statement, the great and awesome things that Moshe Rabbeinu did before the eyes of the Jewish people. Moshe Rabbeinu is a unique, once in history person. There will never arise a person that is of the caliber of Moshe Rabbeinu. Not even close. The thing that grabs your attention and the attention of all the commentators are the last 3 words of the entire Torah, before the eyes of the Jewish people. What is the Torah referring to? What did Moshe Rabbeinu do before the eyes of the Jewish people? The majority of the commentators, they say, well, Moses performed all the miracles of Egypt, splitting of the sea, the 10 plagues, all of that was before the eyes of the Jewish people. And that's a great answer. Rashi chooses a different answer. Rashi looked through the text of the Torah and found a place where something that Moshe did was referred to as having been before the eyes of all the people. What did he find? Moshe Rabbeinu, in one of his admonitions, in one of his rebukes of the Jewish people, he says, I smashed the tablets right before your eyes. Rashi says, that's what it means. The last words of the Torah are a reference to the decision that Moshe Rabbeinu made to smash the tablets of the law, the 10 Commandments, before the eyes of the Jewish people. The story is known. We'll review it for the sake of those who are unfamiliar. 40 days after God gave God spoke the 10 Commandments to the Jewish people, among them, thou shalt not worship idols. Moses comes down the mountain with the brand new sparkly tablets of the law, the luchos with the 10 Commandments on them, formed by God's hand, written by God's hand, and he sees the most terrible sight. The Jewish people are celebrating the pagan worship of a golden calf. You can't find the words for the horror. The Talmud compares it to a bride who breaks her marriage vow while still under the chuppah. Moshe Rabbeinu grabs the two tablets and he smashes them into the ground into tiny pieces. And this is what the Torah wants to close with. This is the moment that the Torah chooses to sum up the life of Moshe with. It's shocking, surprising to say the least. You want to sum up the life of a person like Moshe Rabbeinu, talk about his devotion, talk about his love, talk about his caring, talk about his sleepless nights, the endless work, the sacrifice that he made to live as a public servant every minute of every day. He gave up all personal affairs. He gave up his personal. Say something nice. When you're celebrating 50-year anniversary of marriage, you don't bring up the time when in anger you smashed all the plates in the kitchen, even though you survived that, even though the marriage survived. You don't bring it up, that part of the marriage you want to forget about. Let it go. No, when we're complimenting Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of his life, this is his eulogy by God himself in the Torah. The one thing you want to forget, the time that there was such stress and such enmity and such anger that the Torah itself was smashed on the floor in 1,000 pieces. That's what you want to remember. On top of that, the Torah has a principle that you always want to close on a good note. Mesayimim b'tov. Yeah, the Rebbe always closed with a prayer for Mashiach. Every sermon ends with a prayer for Mashiach or something positive. Every aliyah that we read in the Torah has to close on a positive note, which is why some aliyahs are very short and some aliyahs are incredibly long. Because sometimes in the Torah, it's hard to find a positive note. In Parshas Ha'azinu, the Rambam, which we just read, if you're doing one chapter, as we are doing in Shul, between Mincha Ma'ariv, we just read, the Rambam has to explain why the aliyahs of the portion Ha'azinu are broken up the way that they are, and to explain how the rebuke of Ha'azinu, every aliyah ends in a rebuke, how that's positive, because that's the rule. You have to end on a positive note. And the Torah chooses to end on this note. The entire Torah is summed up on this topic, the smashing of the luchos. The 10 Commandments are shattered on the floor in 1,000 pieces. That's the greatest praise you could come up with for Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of his life. That's what we're going to celebrate Simchas Torah with. 34 years ago, the Simchas Torah Tafshin Mem Zayin, 1987. It was 1986. The Rebbe himself answered this question. And anybody who was there will never forget it. Because it was not just an answer, a theoretical answer. The Rebbe poured his heart and soul into that answer with crying, a raised voice, something you'd never forget. The Rebbe turned the story on its head. The Rebbe said, smashing the luchos was the pinnacle of Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership career, was the highest point in his life. 40 years of boundless love for the Jewish people was packed into that act, was packed into that split-second decision to smash the Torah, to smash the tablets, and not to deliver them to the Jewish people. The analogy is like this, yeah? Moshe Rabbeinu comes down the mountain. He sees the celebrations going on. He understands in a moment that this is not a godly celebration. He understands in a moment that the Jewish people have rebelled against God just 40 days after God gave them the commandment, thou shalt not worship idols. And he realizes he has in his hand the death certificate of the Jewish people. If he delivers this contract, which has not yet been delivered, that says thou shalt not worship idols, he is sealing the death of the Jewish people. In a moment, Moshe Rabbeinu comes to the decision, the Jewish people precede the Torah. The Jewish people come before the Torah itself. And he smashed the luchas into the ground, obliterating the contract that God had with the Jewish people not to worship idols, and thereby saving and sparing the Jewish people forever. Rashi himself brings an analogy for that same answer. Rashi himself says it's like a king who was engaged to a young lady, and the young lady during the engagement neglected her commitment to that marriage, but the king loves her, and a dear advisor, friend, tore up the marriage contract, thereby sparing the life of this young lady. And when the king says we have to punish her, we have to execute, that's what you do. And the advisor says, no, you don't have to, because there is no marriage contract. And the king appreciates it. And in fact, Hashem himself expressed his appreciation of Moshe Rabbeinu, that he spared the Jewish people after that terrible, terrible event of the golden calf. So let's think about the meaning of the story here. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, lives for two things. And for his entire career, he's torn between these two loves. He has this tremendous love of God and Torah. He has a tremendous love for the Jewish people. Moshe Rabbeinu is personified, the personification of Torah. And he loves the Jewish people. When Moshe Rabbeinu faced this question, save the Torah and destroy the people, or save the people and destroy the Torah, it was very, very hard for him. Eliyahu Hanavi himself tells that this is a debate that has gone on for generations. What takes priority? What is the highest love? Does God love the Torah most of all, and the Jewish people were created in order to fulfill the Torah? Or does God love the Jewish people most of all, and the Torah was taught to us in order to beautify the Jewish people? Who came first? Whose love takes precedence? Who serves whom? In that split moment, split-second decision, Moshe Rabbeinu had to make that choice, and he didn't hesitate. The Jewish people come first. The love that God has for the Jewish people takes precedence. And Eliyahu Hanavi himself says, I heard it from God in a book called Tana Devi Eliyahu. He said, God tells me, people think Torah comes first. That's their opinion. I say, my children come first. The Jewish people come first. You know what that means? That means that when Moshe chose the Jewish people, he knew the ultimate truth. Torah itself would choose the Jewish people over the Torah. When Moshe Rabbeinu smashed the Ten Commandments, he was fulfilling the Torah's own will in that case. In fact, it's a law in Torah. It comes all the way down to halacha. You overrule practically every Jewish law, every law of Torah, to spare or to prolong, even for a minute, the life of a Jew, even one Jew. That's the wish of the Torah. That's God's will. And therefore, it's possible to say that this year, Simchas Torah, with all of the difficulties, with all of the inconveniences, with all of the awkwardness, this might be the Torah's favorite Simchas Torah, even as the Torah lies awkwardly and alone on the Torah reading table, or in those areas where synagogues are not even open yet, where Torahs will lie alone and ignored inside their holy arks, inside their cupboards, covered with a curtain in the darkness. This might be the Torah's favorite Simchas Torah, because the Jewish people we're doing what we have to for the sake of the well-being of even one Jew. I'll share with you a tremendous story. It was Yom Kippur. It was the eve of Yom Kippur in 1976, and Rabbi Madanchik from Kfar Chabad was in 770, and he was meditating quietly in a corner. The place was packed, and he was preparing himself for Yom Kippur, introspection, reviewing his behavior, preparing for next year, ready to greet the holiest day of the year. Back home, he's a busy man. He conducted a train day. It was a very long day of work, and then he'd get back to Kfar Chabad. He was on the council of the city of Kfar Chabad, and he spent his evenings working on behalf of the community of Kfar Chabad. He was a very busy man, and when he came for Yom Kippur, he came for Tishrei, for the high holiday season, to Crown Heights to be by the Rebbe. All he wanted was some peace and quiet. And on this Erev Yom Kippur, on the Yom Kippur Eve, he's quietly meditating, and somebody tugs at his sleeve and says, "They want you upstairs." They want you upstairs means the Rebbe is calling. He runs upstairs, and Rabbi Chadakov is waiting for him. That's the Rebbe's chief of staff in the secretariat's office. And Rabbi Chadakov says the Rebbe is not pleased with the state of affairs for women in Kfar Chabad after childbirth. They're exhausted, they're alone, and they don't have the ability to take care of their homes. And the Rebbe is not pleased with this. And the Rebbe insists that something be done about it, that an organization be established, that women should take care of new mothers. That was the message. Yom Kippur commences, Yom Kippur passes. The whole world is running to break their fasts, and Rabbi Madanchik is summoned to the Rebbe's office again. And again, Rabbi Chadakov says, the Rebbe wants to contribute, the Rebbe wants to participate in that project. Here is $1,000 contribution from the Rebbe towards this new organization that he hadn't even had a chance. It was Yom Kippur. He didn't have a chance even to make a phone call about it, yeah? Certainly he couldn't organize the whole organization yet, but the Rebbe was so adamant that this organization be built that he committed, he delivered the first $1,000 towards that effort. What was the Rebbe thinking during Yom Kippur? We just had Yom Kippur. And what is on the Rebbe's mind is the comfort, the ease, the well-being of another Jewish person. That's Yom Kippur. That's the whole Torah. To ease the lot of a single Jew, to make the life of a Jew more pleasant. It's easy enough to say. The Jewish people come before the Torah. The Jewish people are the Torah's priority. What's difficult to say is, the Jewish people come before me. The Jewish people are my priority. The Jewish people come before my comfort. The Jewish people come before my peace and quiet. This is the message we have to take from Simchas Torah Tafshin Pei Aleph. is the depth of the responsibility, the profound responsibility that we have for the well-being, the peace of mind, the health of every Jew, of even a single Jew. To constantly ask ourselves, what am I ready to do? What am I ready to give up? What am I ready to give up for another Jew? We'll close with an amazing story that I heard many years ago. It's going around the internet now. There was a young couple in Jerusalem that were married for several years, and they hadn't been blessed with children. And they tried everything: medicine, Kabbalah, Kameis, Skulas, whatever you could try, they tried. And nothing helped. The doctors told them that they probably have to start coming to grips with the fact that they're likely not going to have their own children. And then the husband found out that it's a segula, it's a good omen to have children if the husband will read the story of Chana and her quest for children, which is read as the Haftorah of the first day of Rosh Hashanah. He decided that year he will pay whatever it costs. He will outbid everybody in the community. He will earn the right to read that Haftorah, to read the story of Chana's quest for children. The auction was very lively. It's a big community, a wealthy community. Didn't matter. He insisted, he kept up, he kept at it, and he bought the rights to read that Haftorah in the hopes that this might be the blessing that he needs. The service continues, and while the Torah is being read, a young man comes over to him and apologizes and says that a mistake had happened, that he and his brother had both bought aliyahs in the auction, but they had bought aliyahs immediately next to each other. The 6th aliyah and the 7th aliyah, and you're not allowed to have two brothers have aliyahs right next to each other. So the man was asking if he wouldn't mind switching, trading honors with him. He would give the hopeful father the 7th aliyah, and this guy would read the maftir. The man's heart sank. He wanted nothing more than to rant and rave at the heavenly court. Why are you doing this to me? But it lasted only a split second. He looks the guy in the eye and he says, deal, no problem. I'll take the 7th aliyah. You can have maftir. Not knowing any better, the man smiled and thanked him. And this hopeful father went up for the 7th aliyah, and the brother of the 6th aliyah read maftir. And the murmuring in the shul was audible. How could a person do that? How could a person be so cruel? To take away the Haftorah of Chana's quest for children from a person who doesn't have any children themselves, who was obviously hoping that omen would work for them. The guy didn't know. And when he got off the bima, he had finished reading the Haftorah, he realized his mistake. You can imagine he was shattered. He didn't know where to put himself. He ran over to the guy and begins apologizing. I didn't know. And the man says, don't worry about it. In the last years, we've tried everything. Doctors, omens, Kabbalah, Kameis, everything. The one thing we haven't tried is giving up something for another Jew. Maybe that's the blessing that we need. And they left it at that. They met again the next year on Rosh Hashanah. And the young man with bright eyes says to the hopeful father, he says, this year I'm going to make it right. Last year I took it away from you. This year I'm going to make it right. I will pay whatever it costs. I will earn that maftir, that story of Chana's quest for children, and I will give it to you. And you will read it this year on my bill, on my tab. The man smiles and says, there's no need. 2 months ago, my wife had twins. giving up something, anything, important things, doesn't matter how great, for another Jew. Perhaps that's the blessing we all need. Hashem should bless us with Mashiach now. Good Yom Tov and a happy Simchas Torah.